So the next point is that, consider this: psychopaths, sociopaths, criminals, narcissists, multiple personality disorders, schizophrenics, alcoholics. What do all these people have in common? All these disorders, if we want to call them that. All of these are the result of survival situations. People are these things because that's how they survived. These are coping mechanisms. Much of your core identity was created around the avoidance of deep suffering. So your psyche erected armor and defense mechanisms against the suffering. So really, what shaped you the most are two things. Two things. The sources of deep suffering in your life, deepest suffering during the first 20 years of your life, and the sources of the deepest love in your life. So whatever those were. And those could have been the same sources. Like it could have, the deepest source of suffering and love in your life could have been your mother or your father. Or maybe your father was the deepest source of suffering and your mother was the deepest source of love, or vice versa. And of course, the closer someone is to you, especially in your, closest family members, they were probably some of the biggest sources of your deepest suffering and love. So really hone in on that, contemplate that deeply, and figure out what those were, because that will sort of unravel this whole situation for you, lay it bare, clarify a lot of things for you. And then see, the sources of the deepest suffering, they create insecurity and fear and senses of inadequacy and coping mechanisms to avoid that at all costs. A lot of times, your coping mechanism is dysfunctional, and it's obviously dysfunctional. You might even know it's dysfunctional, but in your mind, the way it's rationalized, the logic of your mind is that, well, yes, it's dysfunctional and it creates suffering, but not as much suffering as I would have gotten if I hadn't created it. And therefore, that rationalizes it and it stays in its place. Because you fear that if you let go of this coping mechanism, this armor, then sure, yeah, it ruins your life a bit and it causes suffering and dysfunction. But in the back of your mind, you know how much suffering would happen if you didn't have that armor, and you're afraid of that, of feeling that suffering again because you felt it once or twice and you had enough. So you would rather hold that armor up for the rest of your life than to risk the possibility of letting it down and getting a little bit of that suffering. So it takes courage to take your armor down. And also what you have to understand is that there are different kinds of armor. So you can let this armor down, you can find a better piece of armor. So you don't have to completely open yourself up to deep suffering. I'm not saying that that's the solution here, although that's the ultimate solution. But before you get to that ultimate solution, you can upgrade your armor. And you could find healthier coping mechanisms, healthier survival strategies. So it's sort of a carrot and stick model. This was the stick, and then you got the carrot. The carrot is the love, and then this can also, though, lead to dysfunction. Because like I was giving you that example with the approval from my teachers on my grades, and then how that led to me seeking approval through comments and other praise for my work and so forth. That's the carrot. That's the love. So you have to be careful about where you try to get love from, because you can try to get it from very dysfunctional places, from authority figures, from external sources. Ideally, you want to be able to feed yourself your own carrots. So really, you want to become self-reliant and give yourself the love that you are and that you want and that you need and that you feel you deserve. Because really, the only one who can love you sufficiently is your own self. But a lot of times we don't realize that, the most obvious thing. And we somehow think that, well, it's not true love unless it's coming from somebody else. Well, that in of itself already sets you up into a very dysfunctional, problematic situation that will never be resolved. And so watch out. Where are you getting your love from? Are you used to getting it from your parents, from your coworkers, from your boss, from authority figures, from your lovers or sexual partners, from your work? All of that is going to limit you and not allow you to develop to the highest levels that you can.